So welcome everyone to what is the last share of the El and Titrei Monday night series and the first of our series of Cholamoed Shirim. We'll please God be having a share each evening this week at 8 o'clock and with 2 on El Hoshana Rabbah. And we're delighted to be joined this evening by Dayan Simons of the London based in. Thank you very much for joining us again, and we look forward to the Dayan's share.
Thank you, good morning. Thank you, Aban, for inviting me once again. I think it was a few months ago I gave a share as well, and we're still here on Zoom. But in Mitzvah Hashem, we should all have the Zeichel to a year of the Suras Tovus in Yeshua's. It's not been easy, but please God, with going through the Yom Tov of Sukkahs, and we'll all have a good year in Mitzvah Hashem. The title the subject I wanted to speak about tonight was the Devar Halacha on the mitzvah of Chinuch concerning mitzvah Sukkah. As we know, there's a mitzvah of Chinuch. Every parent has a mitzvah to be mechanech their children. Although children under the age of bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah are not obligated to be mekayim mitzvahs, but midrabanon there's a mitzvah of Chinuch on parents to be mechanech their children, even though they're still ketanim, they're still not bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah. So I really wanted to start with a short introduction, maybe a little bit of inspiration for Sukkahs. Very interesting. The Mishnah in Daf Mem Beis in Sukkah tells us that's the main source for Chinuch, and it tells us that the mitzvah that every parent has to be mechanech their child or their sons on mitzvah of Daled Minim. Like all mitzvahs, there's a mitzvah of Chinuch. Daled Minim is one of them. Aaron, do you mind just allowing me to do a share screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got it. I've got it. So I hope you can see. It. So the Mishnah says in Daf Mem Beis, "Koton hayodea lenanea chai belulav." I've got my cursor on it. A cotton, once he's reached the age when he understands, he's able to shake lulav, then he's chayiv for lulav. And the Gemara a few lines later tells us this applies to all mitzvahs. Koton hayodea lenanea chai belulav. As soon as he's able to shake lulav, the parents are obligated to mechanechim. Lehisativ chai betzitzis. Once he knows how to wear tzitzis, then parents have to be mechanech to their sons to put on tzitzis. Lishmo tefillin or lekiach tefillin. So there, as we see from this Gemara, there is an obligation on parents to be mechanech their children for every single mitzvah. At what age does it begin? Each mitzvah depends on the age when the child understands a mitzvah, how to be mekayim the mitzvah. When it comes to lulav, the mitzvah of lulav is lenanea, to shake the lulav. So as soon as a child is reaches the age where he knows how to shake a lulav, that's when the parents have to be mechanech their children. Same with tzitzis, same with tefillin, same with Talmud Torah. That's a Gemara, and that's how it's paskin in Shulchan Aruch in Top Reish Nun Zayin, that as soon as the son becomes of age and he knows how to shake a lulav, a father has to mechanech. The interesting thing is that when it comes to the mitzvah of sitting in a sukkah, that's a Mishnah earlier on in the second period, where the Mishnah tells us that at the end of the Mishnah, Noshim va'avodim uktanim peturim min sukkah. Women, as we know, and avodim are potter from sukkah. They're not obligated in sukkah. It's a mitzvah sasesha zman groma. It's time bound, so women are not chayav in sukkah. And ketanim, since they're underage, are also potter min sukkah. However, the Mishnah carries on. Once a child doesn't need his mother anymore, then he's chayiv to sit in the sukkah. And as the Gemara explains later on the Amud Beis, that the Gemara says, if you can follow my cursor, once he reaches an age of chinuch, then a parent is obligated that the son sits in a sukkah. What age is that? Here the Gemara says, the Mishnah tells us, he doesn't need his mother any longer. And the Gemara explains, and that's how we paskin, if you can follow my cursor, Any child who's reached an age that when he wakes up, he doesn't call his mother anymore, then he's reached the age of Chinuch, where he has to, it's up to his parents to obligate him to sit in the Sukkah. Says the Gemara, Gedolim Nami Koru. Sometimes even older people call their mother or their parent when they wake up. Interesting Gemara. The Gemara says, when he's reached an age that he doesn't call his mother twice, mummy, mummy. If he's so young that as soon as he wakes up, he calls his mother twice, then he hasn't reached the age of Chinuch. Only once he doesn't call his mother twice, is he then chai b'sukkah, and that's how it's passed in Shulchan Aruch, Tokresh Mem, I don't have it in front of me, that any child, once he's reached the age when he wakes up, he doesn't call Ima, then the parents have a chiyuv of Chinuch. And the question is, what is this age? With lulav, we understand. It's an age when they understand how to do the mitzvah. A child, when he can shake the lulav, that's when he has to shake lulav. When he can wear tzitzis, that's when he's chayv tzitzis. But what is this age for Sukkah when he doesn't call his mother when he wakes up? If you'd ask me what is the age of Chinuch for Sukkah, I would say it's much younger. What is the mitzvah of Sukkah? The mitzvah of Sukkah is living, eating, sleeping. There is no mitzvah really. Lulav, the mitzvah is shaking. Tefillin, the mitzvah is laying tefillin. Tzitzis, the mitzvah is wearing tzitzis. So a child has to reach a certain age when they understand our mitzvah, when they're able to do that physical mitzvah of shaking lulav or putting on tefillin. But Sukkah, there's nothing. Everything you do in the house, you transfer to the Sukkah. You eat, you sleep, you schmooze, you play. Every baby from 2 days old is also living. So really the age of Chinuch, possibly, one could argue straight away, whatever he does at home, he's chayv b'chinuch straight away in the Sukkah. But the Mishnah seemingly gives an arbitrary age, which doesn't make sense. The age of when he wakes up, he doesn't call his mother twice. Where's this coming from? What is this age? And I struggle to understand this Gemara. I saw the Brisker of Asakasha, and he says, because a child who wakes up and he calls his mother, he cries for his mother, and his mother's not in the Sukkah, is a mitzvah. As we know that there's a halach in Sukkah, mitzvah, anybody who's not comfortable in the Sukkah, he'd rather be at home, is possible in the Sukkah. If it's raining into the Sukkah, and you're more comfortable at home, you're part of the Sukkah. So it may well be that a child is chayv b'chinuch as soon, a child is chayv b'sukkah as soon as he's able to eat, sleep, and drink. But there's a het of mitzvah, and a child is mitzvah without his mother. That's how the Biskarov learns that till this age, or when he's totally reliant on his mother, as long as he's totally reliant on his mother, he's a mitzvah. That's how the Biskarov learns it. I have a problem with it. Because that's all very well, maybe if his mother's at home and he's in the Sukkah. So this baby is mitzvah when he's in the Sukkah without his mother. But what about if his mother's with him in the Sukkah? Then he can't be mitzvah. He should be chayv b'chinuch. What's going on? Okay, Rabbi Sa, I'd like to challenge you. I've got a thought where this age is of depending on one's mother. If he's so young that as soon as he wakes up, he calls his mother twice, he's potter from chinuch to sit in the Sukkah. I'm going to suggest to you something. I'm not promising Sarai Pshat, but I'd like to hear, I'm challenging you. You tell me if you agree with me. It's a concept in Drush, but I think there may be truth in it. The Pasuk says, we learned it on Yom Tov, that the purpose of Sukkah is L'man yedu de'seichem ki basukkah yishafti es b'nei Yisrael. The purpose of Sukkah is that we should remember that HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked after us in the 40 years that we were in the wilderness. It was a dangerous place, the wilderness. There's wild animals, there's bad weather, and yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked after us. He built us sukkahs. And the Pasuk says that's the purpose of Sukkah. And in fact, the Bach says that unlike any other mitzvah, here the Torah gives a reason for the mitzvah. A person has to be machavan on the night of Sukkot that he has to remember that HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked after him. But that's the concept of Sukkah. And the Sfarim explain that one of the most important Yesodis and foundations of Sukkah is the midah of bitachon, of putting one's total trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We went through 40 years in the desert. There was nobody there to look after us, nobody there to feed us, not with food and not with water, nobody to provide us with clothes, nobody to save us from the elements. It was totally, we relied on HaKadosh Baruch Hu totally. That's the midah of bitochen that we had in the midbar, 40 years. And that's the man Yedu Beresechem, and that's what we have to do. One of the lessons from Sukkot is this concept of being totally reliant on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And on both sides, this applies this year more than any other year. I think, we're going through a difficult time of this pandemic that's gone. We've suffered for it for 6 months, and we all try to work out what is the reason for it. And of course, we're not Nevi'im, we're not prophets, and we're not the children of prophets, and we don't know why HaKadosh Baruch Hu said it to us. But there's one nakuda, I think, which everybody can agree, and that is to appreciate that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is totally in control, and we are. There's nothing that we do that has any effect. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in total control of this world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with one tiny virus, so to say, has caused it to spread over the whole world with its ramifications. I think that's one important yesod which we're learning this year. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is totally in control, and we have to rely on him. And the more we rely on him, the more HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks after us. That is the yesod of Sukkot. The man Yedu Derisem Ki Basukkot Seshakes Bnei Yisrael. There is a medrash, an incredible medrash on Avram Avinu. It says, "V'Hashem beirach es Avram b'kol." HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed Avram with everything. And there's a medrash, one of these peculiar midrashim, where the medrash tells us, what does it mean b'kol? What does it mean HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed Avram b'kol? Says a medrash, Zu Sukkah. V'Hashem beirach es Avram b'kol, Zu Sukkah. What's going on? And I think the yesod is very poshut. We know that Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, their strength was that they had everything they wanted. Commotion, Nisparchu, Aviseinu, Avisein benching every day. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Bakol, Mikol, Kol. With Avram it says Bakol, with Yitzchak it says Bakol, with Yaakov it says Bakol. It says Vashem Be'ach es Avram Bakol with Avram. With Yitzchak it says Va'ochel Mikol. And with Yaakov, when he meets up with Esau, it says, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were blessed with everything, as opposed to Esau. When Yaakov says to Esau, Yesh li kol, I've got everything, Esau answers back, Yesh li rov, I don't have everything. And the difference between Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, who had everything, and Esau, who didn't have everything, is because Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov put their total trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Whatever they had, they knew that's what they needed. They didn't need anything else. They had the complete bitochen HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they were able to say, Yesh li kol. I've got everything I need. I don't need anything. I'm in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A child, a little baby, in the arms of his mother is comfortable. He doesn't need anything. All he needs to be is with his mother. That's all he needs. They can say, Yesh li kol. Esau, unfortunately, who lacked the midah of bitochen, Yesh li rov, he was never satisfied. That's the yesod of Sukkah. That's possibly what the Medrash says, Hashem be'ach es Avram b'kol zu Sukkah, because that's the lesson of Sukkah. Sukkah is with only a few walls, 2 walls and 2.5 walls. We put our total trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We go into a Sukkah which is open to the elements. We're only surrounded with 2.5 walls. Yet we know we're in the arms of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we have nothing to worry about. There's a Gemara in Shabbos which tells us that when it comes to the malacha of stira, of building and destructing, the malacha of destructing is only a malacha on Shabbos if you rebuild in the same place. But if you destruct in one place and you rebuild in another place, you're not chayiv min haTorah. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Where do we learn other malachas of Shabbos from? From the Midbar, from Klal Yisrael in the desert. There they used to pull down the Mishkan in one place and rebuild it in another place. And all the malachas are learned out from the Mishkan. So you see that destructing in one place to rebuild even in another place is still a malacha. So why does the Mishnah say you're only chayiv if you rebuild in the same place? Answers the Gemara, Al pi Hashem yachanu, v'al pi Hashem yisou. Since the pasuk says they took the Mishkan down by the word of God and they rebuilt it by the word of God, it's as if they're rebuilding in the same place. That's the Gemara in the second parak of Shabbos. And the Gemara doesn't really make sense. At the end of the day, they pulled the Mishkan in one place and they rebuilt it in another place. Says the Rosh Hashiva of Radin and Naftali Trop, a beautiful idea in the Gemara. If you go on a train from London to Manchester as a passenger, and you ask the passenger every half an hour, where are you? He'll say, first I'm in London, then I'm in Peterborough, and then an hour later he's in Manchester. He's in a different place every time. A mother who takes her baby on a train from London to Manchester, and you ask the child, where are you? After half an hour, after an hour and a half, he'll give you the same answer every time. Now, baby boy or baby girl will tell you, I'm in the arms of my mother. They don't look at Peterborough, they don't look at London, they don't look at Manchester. Al Pi Hashem Yachanu Al Pi Hashem Yisrael, Klal Yisrael traveled through always this, in the arms of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They put their total trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the concept of Sukkahs. There is an incredible medrash, it's not a medrash, it's Reb Shlomo HaKohen of Vilna. He was the last Rav in Vilna before the Second World War. And he quotes the Gemara in Sukkah, where the Gemara says that the walls of Sukkah are also to have benefit from them. Shem Shamayim is Chalala Sukkah. The Kedusha, the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is on the walls of the Sukkah, and one's not allowed to benefit from the walls of the Sukkah. And he quotes from the Elia Rabbah and the Mateh Ephraim that the word Sukkah has got the name of Hashem, or both names of Hashem, because Sukkah is Gematria 91. Samach, Vav, Chaf, Hey is 91. 91 is the Gematria of the two names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yud K, Vav K, which is 26, and Adnus, which is 65, making a total of 91. So Sukkah, the Gematria of Sukkah, is the same as the two names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Sukkah. And that's what the Elia Rabbah and the Mateh Ephraim say. I don't understand. If you look throughout the Torah, Torah spells Sukkah without a Vav. It's always Samach, Chof, Hey, without the Vav. Without the Vav, it's only 85. It's not 91. How can they say that the Gematria of Sukkah is 91 when it's in fact 85? Because the Torah never spells it with a Vav. Says Reb Shlomo HaKohen of Vilna, incredible of him to say it, but he said that Elia Rabbah is incredible, because he says if you look into Hillim, when David HaMelech talks about the Osid Lavoi, when the Osid Lavoi with the Gola, the Pasuk says, "Vayehi b'sholem Sukkoi," Vayinosei b'tzion, talking about B'zman HaGola. There to be Sholem Sukkoi, the Sukkah will be complete. And he says, if you look in the way we have Ksuvim, it's also written out of Vav. But he said he looked at the Ksuvim in the main shul in Vilna, and the Ksuvim there were written according to the Gaon, a couple of 100 years earlier, and their Sukkah is spelt with an extra Vav. Unbelievable. He says, Vayhi b'sholem Sukkoi. You're right most times without a Vav. But La'asid Lovoi, it will be a complete Sukkah, and that's what it means, that the Sukkah's got the Shem Shemayim. So I saw somebody explained it. We know the word Sukkah, Samach Chof Hey, represents the walls of the Sukkah. Samach is 4. You can have 4 walls of the Sukkah. Chaf, you can have 3 walls. Hey, you can have 2.5 walls. But the Vav tells you can have even less than that, 1 and a little bit. In other words, the lesson of Sukkah is that we can get away with a minimum number of walls, because we know that we have total trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks after us, and he's totally in control. And it'll come La'asid Lavoi, we'll even be able to have less walls than that. Only a Vav. Besides a Hey 2 and a bit, it'll be down to a Vav. Vayhi b'sholem Sukkah La'asid Lavoi. When Mashiach comes, we'll come to Madrega where we'll have total trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that will be the lesson of Sukkah. Vayhi b'sholem Sukkah. That is the man Yedu de Esanki Basukkah Sheshafti. So now if I ask you, this is what I'd like to suggest to you. A child, a baby, you have to be mechanechim to sit in the sukkah. At what age does chinuch start? Lulav is from when he can shake a lulav. Tzitzis is when he can put on tzitzis. Sukkah, I would say, from when he can live in a sukkah. He can live in a sukkah from day one, but it's not true. The concept of sukkah is laman yedu de yiseren, to have full trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. At what point does a child realize that there's somebody else besides his mother? Does he realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in control? When does he begin to realize that? A child, says Chazal, who as soon as he wakes up, a 6-month-old child, he cries for his mother, hasn't yet got the intelligence to understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in control. when he stops, when he looks around the world, when he looks around and he sees there's other people in control, and he starts developing, and he starts realizing that there's other people besides his mother. And ultimately comes to understand that Kadosh Baruch Hu's in control. And on Sukkot, he realizes he can get away with 3 walls and 2.5 walls. And Allah said, Lord, it be 1 wall. As soon as he gets out to that point where all he can see is his mother, Al Pi Hashem, he can't, like a mother in a train, but he's able to realize Al Pi Hashem Yachnu, Al Pi Hashem Yisol, then he can be Makan the mitzvah of Sukkah. Sukkah is not just living in the Sukkah like you live in the house. It's with that understanding of the Man Yedu Deresechem. And I would like to suggest to you, that's why Chazal fixed the age of Chinuch once he's able to wake up and not automatically call his mother. Okay, that was my suggestion as a Hagdama introduction. Let me try and go into a Dvar Halacha. We'll see how it goes. I'd like to start with the Gemara in Sukkah Daf Beis. Just give me a second. Yeah. As we know, the Mishnah in Daf Beis Amud tells us Machlokes Rabbanan and Yehuda how high a sukkah can be. Rabbanan said that a sukkah cannot be higher than 20 amos. Rabbi Yehuda says a sukkah can be higher than 20 amos. That's a Mishnah in Daf Beis Amud Aleph. The Gemara in Daf Beis Amud Beis quotes a brisa. Omar Rabbi Yehuda. I've got it here. I hope you can see my cursor. Maisa behilani amalka. There was a story with Hilani the queen, Belud. She had a sukkah higher than 20 amos. And the elder members of the community used to go in there, and they saw her sitting in a sukkah of higher than 20 amos. And they didn't criticize her. Says Rabbi Yehuda, so from here you see that a sukkah higher than 20 amos is kosher, because the Chachamim didn't in any way criticize her for having a sukkah than 20 amos. Say the Chachamim, that's no proof. That's no proof. Hilani Amalka was a woman. A woman's anyway put from a sukkah. So you know why the Zakanim didn't say anything, because she's put from a sukkah. And they said to her, Rabbi Yehuda said back to the Chachamim, she had 7 sons within the sukkah, and everything she did was by the words of the sages. And the Gemara explains that if she had 7 sons, I'm going to jump a little bit. She had 7 sons. You'll tell me, Bonim Kitanim Hayu. Maybe she had 7 sons who were all under the age of Bar Mitzvah. If she had 7 sons, they probably ranged from the age from 1, from the youngest one was 1, and the oldest one was 7 or 8. So at least one of them was a child old enough, he doesn't need his mother anymore. When he wakes up in the morning, he doesn't call his mother. And if so, there's the Chiyuv Chinuch. And Hilani Amalka brought his sons into the sukkah, and the Chachamim didn't say anything, is a proof that more than 20 amos is kosher. Says the Gemara, and if you're going to say it's no proof, because you're right, a Kotn Shein is chayiv sukkah of chinuch, but it's only midrabanon. And she wasn't interested in keeping drabonons. Says Rabbi Yehuda, everything she did in her lifetime was always according to Chazal. So she kept minatayas, she kept midrabonons. She wanted to be mechanech her children. At least one of her children, her sons, was chayiv sukkah. He was a mitzvah limoi. Yet the Chachamim didn't tell her off, and it was higher than 20 amos. Says Rabbi Yehuda, it's a raya that sukkah is kosher 20 amos. That's the Gemara. There's a diuk which you enforces, an incredible diuk. We know the concept of chinuch is an obligation on parents, a father or mother, to ensure that the children under bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah are mekayim mitzvahs. But they're not chayiv in mitzvahs, children. It's only, as Rashi says in Chagiga, it's in order to get them used to mitzvahs when they get older. You give them a lulav, you give a boitzitzis, Talmud Torah, Sukkah. You ask them, it's an obligation on parents to ensure that children do mitzvahs, to get them used to doing mitzvahs. So I'll ask you a question now. when every parent has to obligate a child to do a mitzvah, do they have to give them mitzvah? Do they have to give them a lulav which is 100% kosher, with completely kosher? Or can one argue that no, since it's only chinuch, in order for them to get used to doing a mitzvah, maybe you don't need all the conditions of a mitzvah. A lulav has to be 4 tefachim tall. Maybe it can be 3 tefachim as well. For an adult, they wouldn't be able to the mitzvah. But for a child, as long as the parent gives them a chayfet shal mitzvah, gives them a lulav, maybe you don't need all the conditions for doing a mitzvah. And that's a discussion in the mitzvah. And the mitzvah says that I've got a proof from this Gemara in that base on the base. Because Rabbi Yehuda says, I'll prove to you that a sukkah higher than 20 amas is kosher, because Hilani Amalka used a sukkah higher than 20 amas. Says the mitzvah, I don't understand. Maybe more than 20 amas is no good. By the end of the day, Hilani Amalka wasn't chayev sukkah. It's only because of the son, mishum chinuch. Maybe as long as a child is sitting in a sukkah, even though the measurements weren't 100% right, maybe that's good enough. So what should be this raya? There's no adults there, there's only children. And for children, it's good enough to give them a sukkah, even if it's higher than 20 amas, even higher than 20 amas is possible. So what should be this raya? Says the Ritva is a proof from here that when it comes to chinuch, you have to do a mitzvah exactly as the Torah requires. And that should be the raya. If more than 20 amas wasn't good, it wouldn't be good for an adult, it wouldn't be good for a child either. And since it was okay for a child, it's raya, it's kosher. I just got to do it for him. Mehosha minon. The kotzim shemechanchim b'mitzvah stasis le'mitzvah b'echsha gomu kagodol. Yeah, when you mechanech a child, you have to give it a proper kosher sukkah, because Rabbi Yehuda brings it out from Hilani Amalka, and he explains. Otherwise, what's the proof from Hilani Amalka? He says at the end of the paragraph, he says, "It was necessary for me to write this. Because I've seen many wise men who made such a mistake. There's many wise men, many chachomim, talmidei chachomim, who say that for chinuch, as long as you give them a sukkah, as long as you give them a lulav, as long as you give them tzitzis, even if it hasn't got all the conditions and it's posel tzitzis, posel sukkah, posel lulav, that's good enough. And he says they're wrong. It's a mefusha gemara from Hilani Amalka. That's his proof. In fact, in the Mishnah Berurah is mashma that when it comes to chinuch, you don't have to, a child does not have to keep everything. As long as you give him a lulav, even if it hasn't got all the conditions, not like the Ritva. As you know, on the first day Sukkot, one has to take a lulav that you own. You have to own the Dalet Minim, the lulav, the Esrog Hadassim and Arobos. A child who's old enough also needs lulav and Hadassim, Esrog and Arobos. Thus, you have to own it like an adult has to own it. So there's a Gemara in Sukkah which says that a father who wants to give his arba minim to his child on the first day, and he wants to give him the best, so he gives it over to him, and he tells his son to be koiner it. And the son acquires it. Says the Gemara, the son is able to acquire. A cotton, when he reaches a certain age, even if he's not bar mitzvah yet, he's got enough das to be koiner it. But there's one problem. He's got the ability to acquire, but he has not got the ability to back his father. His father should acquire it back. Says the Gemara, it's senseless for a father to give the arba minim to his son to acquire, because then the father will never get it back. So don't ever try that, to give it to your son, hoping your son will give it back to you if he's a cotton, because he's not going to give it back to you. And tell the Shulchan Aruch Paskins. Lo yitmenu be a mission of cotton klikum shliyatzavai. And it's a show where it's only one day, the first day Yom Tov. He's only got it only one day. He shouldn't give it to his son before he's been Yitzah. Because the child can be koiner, but he can't give it back. And he gives it back to his father, and his father still needs it for the first day. He won't get it back. Okay. So what should he do? Says the Mechaber, in Teufis in Matinoik, he should hold it with the child without allowing the son to be koiner it. He should hold it together with his son and not allow his son to be koiner it. The question is, Who's going to be Yotze then? The father needs to be Yotze, so he can't let the son own it. So he doesn't let the son own it. So the father will then be able to do it himself. But what about the child? The child hasn't acquired it. The father doesn't want the child to acquire it. Because if he does acquire it, he'll never be able to give it back to the father. So the Mishnah Berurah brings a machlokes. In Sivkot and Chof Ches. Lot Saloma. I'm jumping 3 lines. There's no eitzah for the child, because if you can't allow the child to be koina, then the son will be able to give it back to his father. So he can't be koina it. So only the father will be able to be eitzah, and the child will not be able to be eitzah. Since the father should not be makneh to the son, there's no option. The son will not be able to be eitzah mitzvah chinuch. And the only solution is to buy your son, who's less than bar mitzvah, bar minim, that belongs to him. You have to buy two sets, one for you and one for your son. And it comes out, you should rather buy for a son who's under bar mitzvah than a son who's over bar mitzvah. Because the son who's over bar mitzvah, you can always be makneh to him or be makneh back. But a child who's under bar mitzvah, who needs our bar minim for chinuch, he needs to own it. The only way is to buy him a separate set. Says the Mishnah Berurah, however, yesh ma'achronim shesogim the mitzvahs chinuch miskayim gam b'shol. It could be that chinuch yotza, even on the first day with a child under bar mitzvah, even if the child doesn't own it. Look at the bottom words. Gam bozeh mischanech haben lemitzvahs v'chein mashma b'motra. You don't need to give. The son doesn't have to own it. He's not bar mitzvah yet. It's only chinuch. Chinuch is enough that he's got a lulav in his hands and an esrog in his hands. Even though he doesn't own it, by the end of the day, he'll get used to shaking. And some achronim say this solution of the Shulchan Aruch helps not only for the father, it helps for the son as well. And if we go down to the Shad Tziyun, he brings it from the Motra, and he's quite happy with it. If you can see my cursor, the mitzvah chinuch rak al etzem ha-mitzvah, v'loy al protei ha-mitzvah. As long as the son has a lulav and an esrog and a dasman arovus, even if he hasn't got all the conditions, he can be Yotze Chinuch. And in fact, many people do that they don't give it to their sons to own because they'll never get it back from them. So they'll do the solution of the Shulchan Aruch. And according to the second pshat in the Mishnah Berurah, the father's Yotze, of course, but even the son is Yotze because the mitzvah of Chinuch is only that he does the actual mitzvah without all the protim. We have 2 shittas in the Mishnah Berurah. But the second shitta, and in fact, Moshe Feinstein says, when he lived in Russia, he wrote this in Tokvei Tzadiyah in 1935. He lived in Russia, they were very short of Bar Minim, and they couldn't buy a separate one for their sons under Bar Mitzvah. He said you should be soimach on the second pshat in the Mishnah Berurah. That you don't need to buy a second set for your son under Bar Mitzvah, even though he doesn't own it. You can do it to chinuch. When he got to America after the war, and in America it was much easier to get many Bar Minim, then he says one should buy for children under Bar Mitzvah. You can't be makneh to them. But the second opinion is clear that for mitzvahs chinuch you don't need the whole mitzvah with all the protim, as long as you have a lulav, even if you don't own it. Okay. The problem's going to be now the Gemara in Sukkah that face the Ritva's Kasha. Hilani Amalko, the Rabbi Yehuda brings a raya from Hilani Amalko that she had a Sukkah which was higher than 20, and the Chachomim were quite happy with it. Says Rabbi Yehuda, it's a raya, the Sukkah Namala Michofis Kasha. It's a palace, says the Ritva. What's the raya? The only person who had to be Yotze the mitzvah of Sukkah with Hilani Amalko was not Hilani. She may be an adult, but she's a woman. She's potter from Sukkah. It's for the children under Bar Mitzvah Mishum Chinuch. So I'll tell you really a Sukkah higher than 20 normally is possible for an adult. But for a child that the Mishnah Berurah says, as long as they have a Sukkah, even if they don't have all the protim, they don't own it, it's higher than 20 amos, these are only protim, then they can be Yotze. So what's Rabbi Yehuda's raya that they can be Yotze? That's the problem. I'd like to suggest you an answer how the Mishnah Berurah and in the name of the Motzcha will understand this tomorrow. There is another problem with this tomorrow, which Rabbi Kiva Eger asks And the Trumas Hadishan asks, the mitzvah of Chinuch is an obligation on the parents. Is it on the father or is it on the mother as well? It's a huge machlikas rishonim. Some rishonim say the obligation is both on the father and the mother. Why not? Others say it's only on the father. And the Mishnah Berurah in Hilchos Shabbos, he's not sure whether the mitzvah of Chinuch, an obligation on a parent to ensure that every child does a mitzvah, is that only on the father or even on the mother? There's no question about it that a mother is obligated to make sure that her children go in the right way. Shema b'ni musar avicha v'al titesh Torah simecha. So on the generic mitzvah of ensuring that a child keeps going in the right, like his parents want him to, it's an obligation on the father and the mother. Mother is not exempted from that. We're talking about the actual obligation on particular mitzvahs, whether it's lulav, whether it's sukkah, whether it's tzitzis. Is that only on the father or even on the mother? Now, according to those Rishonim who say it's only on the father and not on the mother, this Gemara in Daf Beis, this Gemara again, we don't understand. We have Yehuda says, I'll bring you a raya that a sukkah l'mala michof is kosher, because Heleni Amalka was sitting with her sons who were chai b'chinuch in a sukkah l'mala michof. And the Chachamim didn't say anything. Is raya the sukkah l'mala michof is kosher? What's the raya? The father wasn't there. The mitzvah of chinuch is on the father, not on the mother. You know, she sat there with her children. They were quite happy. There's no mitzvah of chinuch on anybody. The mother has no mitzvah of chinuch. For Tibkivega, what's Rav Yehuda's raya? It doesn't even start the raya. The Gemara explains the raya is only because of the chinuch of the child. But that's an obligation on the father. And for some reason, the husband of Hilani Amalka, the father of the children, wasn't there. It was only Hilani Amalka. She has no chiyuv of chinuch. So maybe that's why the Chachamim didn't say anything. What's the raya of the Gemara?
Can't we learn from Rivka?
From?
Rivka, that when she passed the yeshivas of Shema Eva, Yaakov pulled one way and Esau pulled the other. That she already then she was chayiv with the Indian of Talmud Torah.
Okay, it doesn't prove there's a chiyuv of chinuch. As I said to you just a few minutes ago, a mother is responsible to make sure that her children fall in the right path. Al titesh Torah simecha. I'm talking about the mitzvah d'Rabbanon, which probably at the time of the office wasn't there yet. A mitzvah to ensure that every child does every mitzvah, lulav, sukkah, tzitzis, and tefillin. Rivka wasn't involved in that mitzvah. So again, on the actual obligation for a parent to ensure that mekayim particular mitzvahs, according to many Rishonim, only applies to the father, not the mother. And if that's a question, what's going on with Hilani Amalka? So I saw once a beautiful teretz in a booklet that was published in 1943 in Shanghai. It was when the Meir Yeshiva was exiled to Shanghai, and the whole yeshiva, a few hundred bochum were there. They learned, and they published a sefer of all the shtiklach Torah which are mechadish in Shanghai. And there was somebody there, Blumenkrantz, who published a beautiful answer. And I was so upset that I thought the answer was brilliant, but this sefer had never been published. I found it in the archive on the Eitzah Chochmah. It had never been published. It was such a beautiful answer. And Baruch Hashem, a few years later, I saw the Stipler says exactly the same answer. And as we know, the muzzle of the Stipler was that all the Sforim are used today. So Baruch Hashem, that idea was never lost. The Stipler book, the same answer as Israel Blumenkrantz. He says an incredible answer. Listen to this. We always understand that chinuch is an obligation on the parent, father, mother. It's obligation on the parents to ensure that to ensure that children do mitzvahs and they follow in the right way. Tosfos in Brachos says an incredible chiddush, which is Stipler of Blumenkrantz bringing out. The Gemara says in Brachos that a child, a cotton, who's eaten food and he wants to bench, he can be motzi a gadol who also wants to bench. The child will say Birkas Hamazon and it'll be motzi the gadol. The child is only chayiv midrabanon to bench, and the adult is chayiv minatorah to bench. Says the Gemara, we're talking about when the adult is also only chayiv midrabanon to bench. When is that? when he's only eaten a kazayis. He's not satisfied from how much he has to eat. Minat Torah, the adult doesn't have to bench. The pasuk says, "V'chalta v'savata v'rachta." It's only midrabanon. So the child is drabanon, and the adult is drabanon. So the child can be motzi an adult. Says Tosfos, and the Stipler brings out, what's going on? The child benching is the obligation of the father or the mother. But the child's got no obligation. How can the child's benching be motzi the adult? Says the Stipler, and Tosfos brings out that you see that Chiyuv Chinuch is not only said on the parents. The parents, of course, have an obligation to be mechanech, chanech l'na'al pida'akol, to make sure that when he gets older and he gets bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah, he'll follow in the right way, get used to it. But besides that, there's a chiyuv on the child. Minat Torah, a child under bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah is potter from mitzvahs. The Chachomim put an obligation on the child to do a mitzvah. And a child under bar mitzvah, besides his parents forcing on him, it's the wrong word to use, forcing, but besides his parents forcing on him to bench, a child has his own chiyuv to bench. And that's how he can be motzi a gadol. The child is chai midrabanan and the adults are chai midrabanan. It's an incredible chiddush of Tosfos. Says the Stipler, when we go back to this Gemara of Hilani Amalka, the Gemara says that she had 7 sons, and one of them was Chaim Chinuch, and the Gemara says, an incredible Gemara. Maybe a cotton is only Chaim Midrabanon, and Hilani Amalka wasn't an Orthodox Jew. She never kept Dirabonons. Says the Gemara, no, she kept everything up Chachomim. The Gemara seems to have had a Havamina that maybe she never kept Dirabonons. She only kept mitzvahs deraisa. She kept biblical commandments. She didn't keep rabbinical commandments. It's incredible. What's the Havamina that Hilani Amalka would not keep mitzvahs derabonon? She would only keep mitzvahs deraisa. The Talmidei Chachomim of the generation came to visit her. They would never have come to visit her if she was only keeping deraisas. Says the Stipler, the Gemara does not mean to say that she only kept deraisas and not derabonons. Of course, she kept rabbinical mitzvahs. But according to Tosfos and Brochus, that a child is chai b'mitzvahs as well as an adult, as well as the adult's obligation to force a child to do mitzvahs, the child themselves has a chiyuv. Now let's think a second. The child, every child, midrabanon is chai b'mitzvahs. Minat Torah, only when they reach the age of 12 or 13 are they chai b'mitzvahs. Midrabanon, they said the chai b'mitzvahs even when they're underage. They're chai b'mitzvahs, but nobody can force them. As the Gemara says that if a child is eating treifa meat, but we're not mechuyev to stop them, because a child, you cannot force a child. A child is chai b'mitzvahs midrabanon, but you cannot force a child. The only people who can force a child to do mitzvahs are parents, because the parents have an obligation. The obligation of chanech l'na'al pida'akol, shema b'ni musar avicha al titesh k'esinecha. So it comes out, let's just sum up quickly, that according to Tosfos and Brochus, every child is mechuyev b'mitzvahs, lulav, sukkah, Talmud Torah, everything. But nobody can force them, because you never force, the children are la b'nei kfir. If a child does it, we can't force a child. But they're mechuyev to do a mitzvah. And for their mitzvah, nobody can force them. However, the parents have got an added obligation of chanech l'na'al pida'akol. Parents are obligated to ensure that children fulfill mitzvahs. Let's come back to Hilani Amalka. Every mother, every woman, even if we're going to say that women are not chayiv in the mitzvah of chanech l'na'al pida'akol, they're not obligated to force a child to do a mitzvah. But the child is mechuyev b'mitzvahs. Tosfos says in Brochus, a child is mechuyev b'drabanan. Every mother who really cares for her child will assist her child to do a mitzvah. She can't force a child because she's not mechuyev b'chinuch. Only a father's chayiv b'chinuch. But the child is mechuyev, and a mother will want to help a child to do the mitzvah. That's what's going on with Hilani Amalka. Hilani Amalka, of course, was exempt from the mitzvah of chinuch to obligate her to force her children to do mitzvahs. But nevertheless, she's not obligated. She can't force her children, but she would want to assist her child to be mekayim his mitzvah, the child's mitzvah. That's what the Gemara means. Chi toimu. The child is only chayiv d'Rabbanon. The child is chayiv, and she hasn't got the obligation to fulfill the child's mitzvah. Says Gemara, she'll do what the chachamim want, and the right thing to do for a mother is to help her child to fulfill the mitzvah. So coming back, the mitzvah of chinuch, to force a child to do a mitzvah, is only on the father, not a mother. But every child themselves has a mitzvah, and the mother will definitely want her child to fulfill the mitzvah. Heleni Amalka, who was a tzaddikus, would definitely have tried to assist her child to be mekayim a mitzvah. Therefore, says Rabbi Yehuda, you're right, there's a mitzvah of chinuch. But I'm sure Heleni Amalka, she would want to help her child doing a mitzvah. So she built a sukkah higher than 20 amas, and the chachamim were quite happy with it. So you see that sukkah l'mala michop is kosher. That's a stipulous pshat in the Gemara with Heleni Amalka. That Heleni Amalka wasn't fulfilling her mitzvah. She was there, at least she wanted to assist the child to be mekayim his mitzvah. Okay, 2 more minutes. Let me just finish up for 2 more minutes. I still got to get back to my original question. We discussed the Ritzvah and the Mishnah Berurah, who says that the mitzvah of Chanech L'Nar Pidarkoi is a parents are obligated, or father, maybe father and mother, to get their children to do mitzvahs in order that when they get older, they'll do mitzvahs easily. We said from the Ritzvah in the name of Sam Rishonim, and the Mishnah Berurah brought as well, that the obligation of the parents is to give their child a sukkah, a lulav, a tzitzis, but it doesn't need all the protim. Because at the end of the day, as long as the child gets used to doing a mitzvah, even if the shir is the wrong shir, even if the daled minim doesn't belong to the child, at least the parents have fulfilled their obligation to get the child to do a mitzvah and get used to it. I'd like to suggest to you, I've got to rise, we're running short of time now, but according to Tosis and Brochus, as the Stipler brings out, that there's a mitzvah besides on the parents to educate their children that the child should get used to doing mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah on the child themselves. Min Torah, only a godel is chayv mitzvahs. Midrabanan, they said the cotton is chayv mitzvahs, but nobody can force them on that mitzvah. But there are chayv mitzvahs. The mitzvah that's on the cotton is to do a proper mitzvah. Min Torah, it's only a godel. According to us, it's got to be a sukkah lesson 20. A godel must have daled minim on the first day sukkahs that belong to him. Midrabanan, they said even children are chayiv, but the chiv on the children, which nobody can force, but is on the children, that's to be mekayim b'shleimus, correctly, 100% correctly. According to Chacham Reb Yehuda, it's got to be a sukkah lower than 20. According to Arba Minim, it must belong to them. When the Mishnah Berurah says parents can give them an Arba Minim that doesn't belong to them, that's as far as the father and mother's chiv is concerned. They only have to train their children to get used to it. So as far as the father and mother's obligation, maybe the mother's obligation, they can give them an Arba Minim that doesn't belong to them, and they've fulfilled their obligation. At the end of the day, they've got their child used to shaking lulav. But the child's chiyuv, which nobody can obligate, nobody can force them, but they have a chiyuv, is to be mekayim mitzvah like a godel. And I think it's partial. I have proofs, but unfortunately we haven't got time now. And if that's the case, we can answer the Ritzvah's kasha on those Rishonim, which, as we said, is a kasha on the Mishnah Berurah. The Rishonim and the Mishnah Berurah said the mitzvah of chinuch on the parents is just to give them the lulav, or the sukkah, or the tzitzis, even if it hasn't all the pratim. What's the right from Rabbi Yehuda that a sukkah higher than 20 is kosher? Maybe a sukkah higher than 20 is possible, but it's good enough for a father or mother who's been mechanech their children. But the way the Stipler learns, that we're not discussing the mitzvah of chinuch on the parents. The mother anyway hasn't got a mitzvah according to some Rishonim. We're talking about the child's mitzvah. Heleni Amalka was interested in helping her son do the mitzvah, because Heleni Amalka didn't have a mitzvah of chinuch, says the Stipler. But Kol Devorah Osasa Pi Chachomim, she was interested in helping the son fulfill his drabonon. She couldn't force him, but he was happy to eat in the sukkah. And she, like every good mother, wants his son to fulfill his mitzvah. For his mitzvah, you need a kosher sukkah. As far as a father's chiyuv to mechanech his children, they could have given a sukkah l'mala michov even called drabonon. But says Rabbi Yehuda, Heleni Amalka was out to help her children, her children's mitzvah. For that, you need a kosher sukkah if you want to help your children. If you want to make sure that your child's doing the 100% correct mitzvah, it's got to be kosher kedin. And according to the Rabbanon, higher than 20 is no good. Yes, as Rabbi Yehuda, Heleni Amalka was only out to help her children do their mitzvah. Their mitzvah has to be kosher. Built a sukkah higher than 20. The Chachamim were very happy with it. She supported her son. She helped the son, and her son, nobody can force him, but his mitzvah is to have a kosher sukkah, and higher than 20 it was, and the Chachamim were happy. So you see, even for the son's mitzvah, higher than 20 is kosher. It must be that for everybody, a sukkah l'mala michof is kosher. Rabbi say, unfortunately, time is short, so I've got to stop here. But that's the issue of the Gemara, according to those Rishonim, the Ritzvah brings down. And as I showed you, the Mishnah Berurah holds that when Abba Minim is expensive and you can't buy for a child that he should own one, then you give him one that belongs to you. And as far as the father's chiyuv, he's been Yetzir's chiyuv. And it's not shver from this Gemara, like the Ritzvah asked, but this Gemara is discussing the child's chiyuv, which is really chiyuv on the child. Nobody can force him. It's up to the child to do. But as far as the parents are concerned, they can't force him. And father, they only have to worry about their own mitzvah. And with that, they can give them Abba Minim, which is even if the child doesn't own it. I hope that was clear.
Yeah, thank you. No, that was a healthy shot. Can I ask a couple of quick questions?
Yeah.
So just first of all, for when Rav Moshe said they could rely on that view of the Mishnah Berurah, was that even with a bracha? That you get the kid to make the bracha?
Yes, absolutely. Because the second shit, which is the Mishnah, if you look at the Shat, that's the main shitter. That as far as the father's obligation and to be mechanech for the child to make a bracha is even a lulav that he doesn't own. The two Reb Moshe's, interesting, were written at two different times. One was written in Russia, and he says you could be somech on the second opinion of the Mishnah Berurah. Later on, he said in America, now that you can buy Abba Minim easily, and especially in Eretz Yisrael, it's easy. You've only got 1 day Yom Tov. So the father's Yotza, and then he gives it to his child, and he doesn't expect it back. The child can be kind, he just can't be marking it back. The problem is in Chutz La'aretz. Well, on the first day, again, not this year. This year we've only got 1 day. Because the first day was Shabbos, it's only get to Sunday. So again, Sunday, you also haven't got a problem. Because on Sunday, the father's Yotza, and then he gives it to his son for keeps. The problem is when you have 2 days Yom Tov, where after the first day, the father needs it back. And Moshe felt that in America, they should buy separate Abba Minim for children once they get a Chinuch. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And on the Dayan's drush at the beginning, again, it's a very beautiful drush. Just the question by tzitzis as well, we say Leman Tizkuru. So, but the requirements for the age of Chinuch is just that he knows how to be Misatef.
So by
Leman Tizkuru Vasi Semech Chometz Sosai by tzitzis. So there's a Leman involved, but the obligation is just based on their capacity to do the action. So the chiluk.
Aaron, I have to think about that question.
Okay.
And leave it with me. I need to think about it.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions before we wrap up? Okay.
Question with Dayan Simons. I'm coordinating a share next Monday.
Oh, Chevra.
Hendon.
You cut off, Mr. Calvert. Just say it again.
Next Monday.
Is it my reception or yours?
Morris is arranging. So I'm in Tanya.
Yeah, it's bad reception. Is it mine or yours?
I think it's Graham's.
Yeah, okay. So we'll be in contact. Is that okay? I've lost him.
Fine. Oh, well. Okay, thank you very much, Dayan Simons, for joining us.
Probably mine. I'm in the Tanya.
And we will be back tomorrow evening where I will be giving the share on what circumstances require one to say a new lay shave. Okay. Thanks very much and good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.